It is the Martha Zoller Show, and we're here with Mike Dugan, who's running in the 3rd District, which is a little outside of our listening area, but it's one of those contested races that I think are going to make a big difference in what the makeup of the House of Representatives is. And Mike Dugan is joining me right now. He's a former state senator. Welcome, Mike.
Thank you. Good to talk to you. Appreciate you letting me on and share the part of our morning together.
So, the biggest concern I have from everybody from Donald Trump all the way down is nobody is really talking about the debt. Nobody is really talking about the budget. And I don't mean you are talking about it, but it doesn't seem to be getting traction. And for me, that is the biggest national security threat that we have.
Yeah, it's huge. And you're right. We are talking about it. One of the issues with talking about it, it's pretty complicated to explain. And there's the actions that we're going to have to take are going to be a little uncomfortable. They're not going to be lethal, but they're going to be a little uncomfortable. We're going to have to tighten your belt just like any place else, a family, a business. When you're spending way more than you're bringing in, you got to find areas to cut back, and nobody wants to hear that.
Well, and I think, too, a lot of people want to focus on foreign aid, and foreign aid is a very small portion of the discretionary part of the budget. The big problem with the budget is the part that's on autopilot, and that's about 3/4 of the budget. And
Yes.
It's hard to talk about those because those are the things that affect people directly.
They do, and that's kind of what I was talking about when I said it's going to be a little uncomfortable. But as you know, and we can't do it exactly like we did in Georgia, but we can take some of the lessons that we've learned in Georgia about going through line by line, and those things that, as you phrased it, are automatic. They still need to be reviewed every once in a while. It shouldn't just be a rollover and we just write it off. It's intentionally supposed to be a little complicated. It's hard work, but we got to have people up there that actually don't mind doing the hard work.
Well, and I think, too, one of the things that are really interesting is that if you look at the 2019 budget for the federal government, it was still roughly $1 trillion more than what we took in. But it is now based on revenues that have come in from the tax cuts and the other things, the increased revenues. We would go from about $4.4 trillion to what if we increased for inflation, where our budget ought to be is about $5.5 trillion. And we overspent in 2019, but because of COVID, we're up over $7 trillion, but not one COVID dollar has been taken out of that budget. It's still there every single year. And that is the biggest problem, that once it gets in there, Mike, no one will ever take it out.
Well, Martha, you've seen that the way our government operates is we're really, really good about adding things, but not good about removing them when they've met their purpose. And that's what I'm saying. It's you've got to go in and cull some of the stuff that has met its purpose and it's gone. We've got, I can give you 100 instances in our country's history where we've had programs, we stood them up, they did what they were supposed to do, and then we shut them down. Unfortunately, in the last, 40, 50 years, we never shut them down.
So you've got a big race over there in the 3rd District. First, two questions. What are you hearing when you're on the ground talking to people? What's important to them? And secondly, if you're elected, how are you going to start righting this ship?
Two things. Actually 3 things. The first thing is obviously the southern border is the question I get the most. Second is the debt. It's people understand that is problematic. And then the third thing that they talk about is we have to have a government that actually functions, and not just one where you have people go up to scream about problems and not be able to identify solutions. And that's the 3 things that people say, are you the guy that can handle these? And our message is going really well. It's, we all are part of 15 counties, and we've been to all of them, and the response we've gotten has been great. They just want to know they got somebody that's going to go there that has some common sense, that's got a proven track record, that's actually going to work for the constituency.
So as far as being one of 435, how, if you're elected, how do you get up to Washington and start making a difference?
The same way I've done it in the Army, the same way I did it in business, the same way I did it in state legislature is first you've got to work with people and they got to understand that I'm trustworthy to start with. And that seems kind of trivial, but it's huge. People want to know that the person they're talking to is not going to stab them in the back for their own personal gain, that they are really invested into working for the betterment of their district, their state, their country, and will actually sit and listen to all sides of an issue and not just be a talking head up there. That's part of it. There's another part of it that, if somebody's got a good idea, don't get in their way. Help them get their good idea across the finish line. Support them and do everything you can to support it as if it was your own. And I don't see that as often. It seems like we got 435 individual CEOs that are working at cross purposes against each other, and that's just not the way any organization is supposed to work.
Now, you have, are there 3 people in your race? Is that right?
It seems like 100, but there's only 5 of us.
Oh, 5 of you. Okay, so there's 5, so this is likely going to go to a runoff. And obviously there's the big question about President Trump, who supports President Trump, who doesn't, all of that kind of stuff. So how are you hearing that on the ground? Because you got to be preparing for a runoff, but you also want to be able to get your issues out there.
Yeah, we're focusing on issues. I mean, every Republican in the race, because I said 5. There are 5 Republicans. There are 2 Democrats. But every Republican in the race supports President Trump. So that's not really an issue. Now, there is one candidate that was endorsed by President Trump, and I mean, he was a staff member for him, so I would be shocked if he hadn't endorsed him. But what we've done is focus on our message. Here's what we've done. Here's how we got to this point, and here's what we want to do. And that's what I was talking about a second ago. People just don't want to hear about problems. They know what the problems are. They want to hear, do you have a plan on how to fix them? Are you willing to work with others to fix these issues that are negatively impacting our nation? So that's where it's going. And there's a strong possibility to be a runoff. But the Trump factor that you were talking about a little while ago, there are 3 distinct groups. There's the group that will do whatever President Trump says. There's the group that really, really supports President Trump, but is comfortable picking their own candidate because they know us. And, surprisingly, there's a group out there that don't care as much about President Trump, and it kind of works against you. So we've tried to just stay on our focus, our message to tell who we are and what we're trying to achieve.
So this is a pretty short cycle because it wasn't an open seat. It was an open seat, but it didn't come open until I think the end of last year when that announcement was made by Drew Ferguson. So it's a fairly short race. What are your thoughts about this race? What have you learned? And how has campaigning been different for this than it was for your state Senate seat?
Well, it may seem short on your side. No, it's been great. And I understand what you're saying, and you're right. But, the only difference is where I was campaigning in 4 counties before, it's all or parts are 15 now. But the methodology is the same. The methodology is wherever there's a group that's together, we go. Anybody that invites us to come talk to them, we go. We've been to every one of the counties multiple times, and that's what that resonates. They want to know that if elected, 1, they can get in touch with you. 2, you're going to actually do what they want you to do, and 3, you won't forget where they are. So that's, if they're not coming to visit you on the campaign, they're not going to come to visit you when you're elected.
So the question we just got before you came on the air, which is kind of in the same ballpark of what you're talking about, is that the listener said, and they're going to call back after the top of the hour, that you hear from these guys all the time when they're running, but they're really hard to find once they get elected. How are you going to guard against that? Because your life, if you're elected, your life's going to change. Your schedule's going to change. How do you guard against that impression that you're everywhere when you're running, but you're hard to get? Not you, but in general, the person's hard to get once they're elected.
Well, I mean, you are a little tougher to talk to, and you know that, physically on the phone. But you still, when you're out of session, you come down as much as you can to each of the individual counties, and you set up a time where I'm going to be there. You get it out with enough notice that people can come and visit you. Part two on that is you have to have a really, really strong district office and staff that handles constituent services. You know, nobody ever talks about constituent services on the campaign trail, but even when I was in the state Senate, I'd have a lot of people that would call me about Social Security, VA, passports, you know, a lot of things that are federal, but they knew me as their state senator, so they would call me. So, you know, then I would have to work with Drew, or I was in a position where I overlapped 3 different members of Congress. So working with their offices, I know the importance of what constituent services does.
So you're a veteran. We're coming up on Memorial Day, where we remember the people that gave all for this country. Yesterday, I had the opportunity to interview a World War II vet that's going to the D-Day celebrations. He's almost 100 years old. He is an amazing guy. Tell us a little bit about your military service.
So I'm one of those weird ones that enlisted in the Army after I graduated from college. And towards the end of my enlistment, they came and said, we think you'd be a good officer. Would you be willing to go back to school? So they sent me back to school. I got my master's, got commissioned, and came back in as an infantry officer, and served primarily in the Airborne Ranger community during my time. And I did 20 years, 2 months, 4 days. And everybody goes, wow, you must have been ready to go. And it's kind of the opposite of that. It's such an impact on your life that when you leave it, when you step away, you remember that forever. And I loved it. I got the opportunity to see a lot of places in the world. Some of them were friendly, some of them were not. But it helped me. It helped me shape a vision on current events that are going on now. As you may or may not know, during my last 2 years, I worked in and out of Israel. And so the stuff that I'm seeing now with Gaza, I got a very close-up look. I was basically focused on Hezbollah when I was there, but we did see Hamas.
Absolutely. Mike Dugan, if people want to get in touch with you, how can they do that?
Go to votemikedugan.com, and it has all of our contact information on it, and we'd be glad to talk to them.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for being with us today, and good luck on the 21st.